Hey again, everybody. This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. I'm back at Beneduce Vineyards with Mike Beneduce. Mike, thanks for having us back.
Thanks for coming.
This is kind of, I don't want to say it's the end of the line, because one of the things we've talked about all year long is that the work is never done.
Yeah, right.
But it's the end of an important aspect of the line,
Definitely.
so to speak, right?
End of the cycle.
End of the cycle, and that is?
Harvest. So
harvest.
We just finished picking all our grapes yesterday.
Everything's in.
Everything's in. We're getting a nor'easter this weekend, so we want to make sure
you really want to get
everything in for the weekend.
Yeah.
This is Blaufränkisch that we're crushing today.
Yeah,
so
beautiful. Really,
we picked them yesterday. We put them in a cooler to chill everything down overnight. And now we're gonna go into this machine, which is our de-stemmer crusher. It does exactly what it sounds like. It separates the berries from the stems, so you can see how there's kind of a stem in between, and that's green and bitter, so we don't want that in the wine. So this machine is gonna basically knock the berries off the stems. The stems will shoot out into our garbage can, which end up in our compost. And then the berries will drop into that bin below. And we just do a very light crush, so basically just opening up the berry like that.
Just to get the juice to be able to start to run out.
And then basically the yeast finds its way inside the berry and ferments it from the inside out. And then it breaks it open and kind of finishes it up.
As we've seen throughout the year, even starting in January, everything here is done by hand. And so these were picked by hand, field sorted by hand, and you're going to continue to sort them to make sure you get the best quality grapes in there, right?
Yeah, we're actually doing a triple sorting this year. So it's been a rough vintage because of so much rain in August and September.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that anything that's ending up in our wine is perfect looking fruit like this is. So we do the first hand harvest field sorting in the vineyard. So basically any cluster that doesn't look good, they're going to pick it and throw it right on the ground so that it composts itself back in. What they think is good is ending up in these lugs behind us. Next step is for us to dump into the hopper. I'm going to be doing the physical sorting on the hopper, so anything I don't like, just underripe, or maybe there's some botrytis or something, we're going to sort that out, or any leaves that made it through, we'll sort that out. And then we have some staff that's going to actually be picking at any little small bits of stems that make it through. We'll pull that down as well.
A leaf here and there and stuff like that, because that will impact the flavor, especially in a year like this where you didn't get as much ripeness because of the weather. So you really want to make sure that that's not in the flavor profile.
Yeah. So even though the stems typically are not ending up in the wine, all those components, even the little bits and pieces of them can influence the flavor of it. So we want to make sure we basically start with the best we can.
And as we know, those big mass producers aren't doing, they're not doing triple sorting, they're not even doing sorting really. Everything just kind of goes into the hopper and then through the magic of chemicals and science, they make something that sort of is like a food process version of wine.
The main difference, or one of the main differences between a commercial producer and a small or artisanal producer is whether or not they hand harvest. So we're literally picking every cluster by hand, and humans are touching it and deciding whether or not it's worthy. Most big producers are using machine harvesters, which is just a tractor that goes over the entire row, shakes the crap out of the canopy, and all the clusters and leaves and whatever else ends up in the bins, and they're just using that. So it's
twigs, bugs, rocks,
snakes. I've seen it all.
Critters, they all go in there, and of course, in their process, they'll all get scrubbed clean. But here, this is much different process and a better process. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. It's just a better process, and that's why your wines are good. Really good. So great. Let's see how this works.
Let's check it out.
Okay. I'm sitting here on top of the world. This is on top of the red wine making world, isn't it? It's the start of the next process here.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to say one of the interesting things about this vantage point, and Mike and I have talked about this not just this year on video, but for years, is how much cleaning goes on and how much handwork goes into this. And just from here, I could see everything's getting cleaned and sprayed down already, and it's a critical part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, we sanitize these machines before and after every time we use them. So this, the beginning of the day started sparklingly clean. And then, as soon as we're emptying the lugs, we got somebody washing them down already, because if they dry, it's much harder to clean them. It's like juice. It's juice. So we try to get them when they're wet, kind of. So what we're going to do now is going to start handing the lugs up to you. We'll put them inside this hopper, and I'll just kind of explain how this machine works. All right, so this is our de-stemmer crusher. So basically we're putting a lug of grapes in there. This auger turns, and it's basically a big screw that moves the grapes towards this opening here. And then just watch your mic there. This is what the inside of it looks like.
Wow.
Well, obviously we've been crushing grapes today, but the grapes fall down in here. These paddles spin, and they knock the berries off of the clusters. And then it's also another screw, and so it moves the clusters this way. And as this thing turns, the berries fall through here, and the stems are too big to fall through the holes, so they get trapped.
And they get shot out the side.
And then they basically get shot out the side. So we're separating the stems from the berries, which fall down.
And they're going in the bin, and they're going to be composted. It takes a couple of years to compost those, right?
Yeah, we compost for 2 years usually.
Now, one of the things that was interesting watching the last swing here, where you were dumping the grapes in. You and your team here, it's like a dance company. Yeah. I mean, it really is amazingly coordinated. Everybody's kind of moving in concert. You really, a big part is getting a flow, isn't it?
Definitely. Right? And anytime you make a change to the team, you feel it because they're out of step with everybody.
Somebody new in the dance company, right?
Yeah.
Yes. From the very first shoot we did in January on that 14-degree day, when you're pruning out there, what I like to say to people, and the point we want to make is that your wines, any wine, good wine, costs a certain amount when you're doing all this by hand.
Yeah. Labor's the main factor. In
right, and it's not just labor. It's labor with care. Yeah, it's not just work. It's love, and you're taking care, and you don't have to triple sort if you're a winery. But if you're a Beneduce winery, you do have to triple sort.
I think it's a pride thing too. We just have too much pride in the wines that we're showing to people, so we want to do every possible step we can to make it the best we can.
Okay, so we went through the destemmer. Yep. Got that nice gentle squeeze going on these, and we've got the bins, and there's plenty of them. What do we have here? What's going to happen to this?
So this is about 1,800 pounds of grapes. This will end up making about 700 bottles of wine, this individual bins. You can see how many bins we're working with.
Yeah.
So once we kind of crush up the berries, the juice gets released, and we can ferment this either with wild yeast, so whatever was on the grapes out in the vineyard, or we can add a commercial yeast that we select for certain characteristics. So maybe it's a really clean fermenter or a fast fermenter or whatever. We use about 20 different strains of yeast in here, including some wild fermentations.
Wow.
So this is crushed up grapes. We add about maybe a quarter cup of yeast to this whole thing, so it's a very tiny amount. And then the yeast are actually a lot like us. They breathe in oxygen and they breathe out CO2. So one of the reasons we do open fermentation is so that it's giving the yeast plenty of oxygen. So they're breathing in oxygen, they're breathing out CO2, and those CO2 bubbles get sort of trapped underneath the skins.
Right.
And they make those skins float to the surface. We want the skins to be in contact with the juice underneath it, because the juice is basically pulling the color and the tannin and a lot of the flavor.
Right, exactly.
So we want to make sure that all these skins stay wet, basically. So twice a day we do what's called punch downs. We do it with this punch down tool, which is just a stainless steel tool.
It's part of the Beneduce workout plan, isn't it?
And so we punch those skins.
It's a cap.
You're punching the cap.
It's the cap. Exactly. So just so people know the lingo.
Yes.
And so you're getting it back down where you're getting the benefit of it.
Right, so you can see right underneath the surface is all that wine that's fermenting, and you can see all the bubbles.
Just gorgeous,
So that's all CO2 bubbles. And these have been fermenting for about 6 days.
Wow, it smells great.
Yeah, it's really fruity at this point. And so we're tasting these every day, checking the temperature of the fermentation, checking the amount of sugar.
Right, that's because these things can heat up pretty quick, right?
Yeah, they can get, they'll peak in like the mid 80s, just naturally because the yeast has so much activity. And then, we're doing this twice a day. So typically first thing in the morning and the last thing before we go home at night, so that it's kind of spread out. And then tasting these every day. And so eventually we'll start to decide that we've extracted enough from the skins. The color and the tannin is kind of where we want it. And then we'll press it. So we'll send this whole bin. We actually have like a forklift that picks these bins up and dumps it directly into our press.
Okay. The same press that you're using for the whites.
Same press we use on the whites, and so then we're basically pressing the rest of the wine out of the skins, separating the solids, again, back into the compost pile. And the wine itself will get pumped into oak barrels for aging. And that whole process takes about 2 years, and then another year of aging in the bottle. So we'll be drinking this in about 3 years. Got to be patient.
Yeah, we've talked about that in other videos. It's a long game, isn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Even when we did the video where you were planting the new vines, that was a number of years in the making before you even hit them into the ground. And now it'll be a number of years before they yield something that's workable. So it's a stretch. This is, and you said it's going to be roughly 2 weeks, and it's not 2 weeks on the nose. It's really, again, it's a combination of science and art.
Yes.
It's taste, it's smell, it's sight, but it's also, when you analysis as well.
Yep, all those things. Definitely a good blend. We're doing the monitoring, doing the analysis in the lab, but in the end, the wine glass is our best tool we have in here.
Smells great.
Yeah.
Smells great. Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. So it's the end of this aspect of the cycle, the growing cycle, right? I mean, this is it. There's nothing left on the vines. I mean, here or there you might find a grape here and there, but everything is picked and you're in the final throes.
Pretty much. Yeah, I always feel like it feels so lonely out here because, like, for the last 3 months we've been staring at grapes on the vine, and then you come out one day and it's just like empty.
Because you're here every day, it must seem noticeable.
It does. Right? Yeah, definitely. It gets a little, I don't want to say depressing, but you definitely go through some emotions when you see a vine like this that you've taken 12 months to grow to that, and ripen the fruit and everything, and then it's totally different. But if you're a farmer, you're just so naturally connected to those cycles, and it's just part of your year. Like, this is the year I got married, and this is what the weather was like, you know what I mean? And so there's different connections you make in your life.
And this year's child was kind of problematic.
This year was a problem child.
a little bit of a problem child, right? But you're getting it all straightened out now.
Well, like a problem child, it just needs extra attention, I think. And so that's what we're doing in the winery, is we're sort of putting extra work in the winery, making sure everything is sorted, making sure that we're really on top of the fermentations to make sure that we get clean flavors and all that. And so, it just requires a little extra attention. A year like last year was such a beautiful vintage that
was a perfect child.
It was a perfect child. It was like a straight A student out of the womb, So it was a lot less work for us.
Just get into Cornell.
Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully, rooting for it. But yeah, I mean that's part of it, and it makes you appreciate both vintages when you go through the cycle like that.
Right.
I think when you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of vintage variation, you don't always appreciate that, and it doesn't show in the wines. The other thing that's interesting for me is that these wines will taste different than last year's wines because the weather was different. We want to tell that story in the wines. We don't want the wines to be the same every year.
Right, you're not doing this, this is not a major science project where you're trying to get the same consistency of product every year like the mass producers do.
Yeah, no,
it doesn't matter what the year is, because their wine's always going to taste the same, and because of that, it's often going to be lacking in real character.
I think so too. I mean, we want consistently high quality wines, but we want them to tell the story of that vintage and everything that came with it.
But you know what? You got married this year, right in the middle of that cycle, and that'll be reflected in your wine. Yes. It will be. It will be. It's a big thing to go through in life, and it's a great thing to go through. So even though the season was a problem child, if you will, it was a great year for you too.
Absolutely. Yeah, overall.
Yeah. So. But the cycle may be over, now the grapes are all picked. I mean, it's kind of interesting too. I don't think people realize it, but just like a tree, the leaves do change. They change color and all, and different grapes actually change in color too, right?
Absolutely, some of them are really red, some get orange. These just got hit with frost a couple days ago, so you can see how they're kind of starting to die. And then, like you said, just like a maple tree, they'll drop down. And we're basically in the winery for the next month and a half.
I was going to say, your focus really is now there, but then at some point you have to start turning your back here, right?
And there's plenty of work to do out here. We're pounding posts for new plantings in the spring, so we'll start doing that next week and kind of straightening up the wires and rolling up the nets and all that stuff. So there's still work to do out here.
You're not laying back.
No, right, exactly. And then we'll start our pruning in basically late December, early January.
So we just want to make sure that there's no seeds in your teeth. But you just said that you're eating grapes all day long, and it's not because you're eating. You're constantly tasting and testing, right? Because that's as scientific as the process is. There's the art of it, and taste is often an art and a focus or attention.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, every row is different almost. So even within a block, the top of this block gets a little bit more water than the bottom of the block. The grapes actually taste different even within a 1 acre block. So every time there's fruit coming in the winery, I'm constantly tasting, making notes of how thick the skins are, how ripe the seeds are. what does the juice taste like? What does the color of the juice look like? And we're actually changing our winemaking practices to suit whatever that information is coming into us.
Yeah.
So it's a constant thing where you're tasting all day.
Yeah, and one of the things I often say too, once I got a real interest in wine, it actually helped me to stop and slow down and consider not just what I was drinking, not just the wine, but any food that you have too. And I'm sure you do the same thing too. You're not like sitting at a meal and over-analyzing it and being all kinds of like humpy in front of everybody. But at the same time, because it's what you do, because it's the way you're now trained.
Definitely.
You stop and consider.
Yeah. You taste something and you're like, oh, do I like this? Do I not like this?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Not just is this good or not, but like, is it too salty? Is it too sweet? Is there not enough acidity or whatever? You definitely start to taste everything differently and smell things differently.
Yeah.
I'm in the grocery store like smelling orange peels.
I've seen you do that too. I've seen you in the grocery store do it. I bumped into you. But it's interesting because unfortunately in American culture we a lot of times eat and drink mindlessly.
Yeah, I think
people stand at a counter or they just they want something that's cold and refreshing without any impact on or thought to what the taste of it may actually be. But it's kind of nice to actually stop and
I think that's changing. I think people are starting to care what they eat. I mean, it's such a big part of our heritage, or our culture, and so people are starting to kind of catch on to that.
Well, it's interesting though. It's funny you say what they eat, because I do think people are much more focused on the food they're putting in their mouth, more so I think than the beverage. They're starting to catch up with the beverages and their interest in that too.
I agree,
and I think that benefits you, who is doing this on a local and artisan level. That people are hopefully going to start seeking that out.
Yeah,
much more.
It's a food product. Wine is a food product. It happens to be liquid, but it's still a food. It still has to be grown somewhere, and all of those things influence the flavors, and so.
You're right, it is a food product, and that's why I often say that those mass-produced wines are food processed.
Right.
And because they actually are. And one of the questions I pose to people is I'll ask people, who here eats Wonder Bread? And no one in a room will raise their hand or admit to it, right? But then I say, then why would you drink the wine equivalent of a Wonder Bread?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, you're kind of right about that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so there's no Wonder Bread here.
No, this is like that hand-kneaded sourdough.
That's right. Truly hand-kneaded.
Yes.
So, good. So Mike, thank you. Thanks again for having us out. It's been an interesting year. I know people who watch these videos have found it really interesting. I know the year's not over too, and there's even more aspects of this process of a vineyard and a winery that we should probably pick up and cover at some point soon.
Definitely.
But it's been interesting at this juncture, at this end of the cycle of the year.
Yeah.
And even it's not even a year, right? The 1 year goes and bleeds into the next. So thanks for having us out again and making time out of a really, I know, busy and crazy time of year. So
no worries.
This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped, with Mike Beneduce of Beneduce Vineyards. We'll catch you again next time.